We didn't give women the vote till 1920. Women didn't get the vote in this country. That means American democracy is 94 years old. There are 3 people in my building older than American democracy. That's how women have had a rough time.
It's not been too long at all since we even had the right to cast a vote. Well, not a woman here could vote no matter what age, and the 19th Amendment struck down that restrictive rule. Oh, yeah.
August 26, 1920, women won the right to vote with the passage of the 19th Amendment. But despite educational programs like this Schoolhouse Rock video published in 1974, many Americans are uneducated about the historic fight for women's suffrage. Suffrage meaning right to vote.
With all of the election stuff coming up, I figured what better time to do a little prank where I'm going to see how many people I can get to foolishly sign a petition to end women's suffrage. Basically what we're doing is we are signing a petition to end women's suffrage. Would you want to support that?
I would.
All right.
Sure. Let's end women's suffrage.
Yes.
Finally.
End women's suffrage, yes.
Sure, why not? That's fine. Definitely.
Let's end women's suffrage.
Do you know that women's suffrage means the right to vote?
Oh, I did not know that.
Awesome.
This prank video by YouTuber Chris Clemens demonstrates how many Americans don't even know what the word suffrage means. Too many women fought too hard for us to ignore their heroic battle against sexism and inequality that was the fight for women's suffrage. In 1848, the first women's rights convention in the United States was held in Seneca Falls. Many consider this meeting of 200 female activists as the beginning of the fight for women's suffrage. The National Women's Suffrage Association was formed in 1869 and led by Susan B. Anthony and Elizabeth Cady Stanton. Pioneer in women's studies Eleanor Flexner described the association as willing to take up the cudgels for distressed women whatever their circumstances, be they fallen women, divorce cases, or unpaid seamstresses. The National Women's Suffrage Association often took up the natural rights argument that stated if uneducated and, in their eyes, un-American immigrants could vote, they, as native-born citizens, should also have the right, regardless of their gender. In the early 20th century, the fight for women's vote took a turn as a new generation of mostly college-educated activists joined the movement and made it their own. They used more aggressive tactics that many of the older activists disapproved of, like large protests and parades that gathered attention and support for their cause. Under the leadership of Alice Paul, the National Women's Party was formed in 1916. They became the first people to ever picket the White House. This group of protesters, known as the Silent Sentinels, protested 6 days a week for 5 months. These women started getting arrested for the unfounded charge of obstructing traffic and were imprisoned in the Occoquan workhouse. After Alice Paul was arrested in 1917 and put in solitary confinement for 2 weeks, she started a hunger strike in prison. Women who refused to eat in protest were forcefully and violently fed. Sylvia Pankhurst described her experience like this.
I felt them and a steel instrument pressing about my gums, feeling for gaps in my teeth. I was trying to jerk my head away, trying to wrench it free. 2 of them were holding it, 2 of them dragging at my mouth. I was panting and heaving, my breath quicker and quicker, coming now with a low scream which was growing louder. Then something gradually forced my jaws apart as a screw was turned. The pain was like having teeth drawn. They were trying to get the tube down my throat, and I was struggling madly to stiffen my muscles and close my throat. They got it down, I suppose, though I was unconscious of anything then save a mad revolt of struggling.
The imprisonment and mistreatment of the Silent Sentinels outraged many and gave a push toward the growing support of women's suffrage. June 1919, the Senate passed the 19th Amendment, but it still had to be ratified by the states in order to take effect. States cast their votes and things looked bleak. It was up to Tennessee to tip the scale, and Tennessee's state legislators tied. Representative Harry T. Byrne had to cast the deciding vote. He was opposed to the amendment, but thankfully his mother wrote him a letter convincing him to approve it. And so, on August 26, 1920, women gained the right to vote. That year, more than 8 million women across the U.S. voted in presidential elections for the first time, which increased the popular vote dramatically, from 18.5 million in 1916 to 26.8 million in 1920. However, many women were still unable or unwilling to exercise their right to vote. In fact, it wasn't until 60 years after the 19th Amendment, in 1980, that American women turned out in equal proportion to male citizens on voting day. The passage of the 19th Amendment was a huge step forward in women's rights and ushered in a new feminist movement of the 1920s, where women fought for social equality. Without the bravery, dedication, and strength of women who came before us, we would not even have the right to vote. It's up to us to remember their struggle and to follow their legacy to make America equal and free for all.
Now you have heard of women's rights and how we've tried to reach new heights if we're all created equal. That's us too. Yeah, but you will probably not recall that it's not been too long at all since we even had the right to cast a vote.